Hi, good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to the culmination of Nigeria Week at the Loeries. So the Loeries Nigeria Week time where we've been speaking to a lot of great leaders from across the creative industry across Nigeria. We are waiting. We had a chat with His Excellency Thami Mseleku earlier, and he is about to join us right now. So I'm just going to request that he starts his video. And just make sure that there's no technical challenges while we get started. Your Excellency, I'm not sure if you can hear us. Would it be possible to start your video? Apologies, everyone. We seem to be having a little bit of technical difficulties while His Excellency joins again. If I can please ask Susie Bowling, Simon, or I'm not sure if Lindy Shibangu is on the line. If Lindy, if you can please contact His Excellency and just let him know that we've lost him. As we go through it and as we wait through it, this may be one of the key things that we can start discussing. And really, really important at this stage is that as part of this Loeries Nigeria Week, we have been focusing on Nigeria, on the creative industry in Nigeria, and learning about the experiences that various leaders within the Nigerian environment have had, especially two gentlemen, Lanre and Ranti, who joined us from Noah's Ark and from TBWA Concept, leading up to the Loeries chairperson, Siditso Rangaka, who joined us yesterday to tell us what judges are looking for in winning work. And we've now reached to this point as well, which is a culmination, which is having a very interesting chat with His Excellency, Mr. Thami Mseleku. Thank you so much for joining us, Your Excellency.
Yes. Thank you very much, Preetesh. How are you?
Very good, and yourself? I was just giving everyone a little bit of a background, maybe in terms of our chat. And I think the key thing is, as the Loeries, our key goal is to recognize, reward, inspire, and foster creative excellence. And our chat today with His Excellency is really designed for that inspirational part. Just to give you some background on His Excellency, and I'm gonna read from His Excellency's biography that's on the website. It says, High Commissioner Thamsanqa Dennis Mseleku is a teacher, diplomat, and flexible leader with strong interpersonal skills developed through his passion for education and development. His passion for serving his country and people began in 1985 as chairperson of the National Education Union of South Africa. With the dawn of democracy, he was appointed as the Director General of the Department of Education and later becoming the Director General of the Department of Health, two areas that are really important during this COVID-19 pandemic. High Commissioner Mseleku joined the diplomatic service in 2010 as the South African High Commissioner to the Federation of Malaysia. From Southeast Asia, he was appointed to the United Republic of Tanzania from 2015 to 2019. And in October 2019, His Excellency began his tour of duty in the Federal Republic of Nigeria. Hi, Commissioner Thami Mseleku. Thank you so much for joining us and being able to share some insights with us today. How are you doing? How are things in Abuja today?
Thank you very much, Preetesh. Abuja is fine and sunny. Everything is okay, and we are all under COVID-19 restrictions, but we're getting there.
Your Excellency, I know it's very useful to try and understand. We've been chatting to some gentlemen earlier this week who in the creative industry were sharing with us the experience from their way of actually working. But something that we chatted about a few minutes ago as well is diplomacy, and in your field of expertise, that craft really requires a lot of interaction. How are you finding this new way of working during this time?
Oh, very, very challenging. In fact, Preetesh, two of my colleagues have actually written very, very nice articles on this experience. One, our colleague in Brazil, Ambassador Machimbe, and my colleague here, Bobby More, who's our Minister Plenipotentiary. they've been writing about this experience and talking about the fact that diplomacy is actually a craft that requires relations, contact. In fact, I think it's a contact sport, Preetesh. You know, diplomacy is about engaging in networking, etc. And now, when you have to be restricted and to engage with people in this kind of manner as we are engaging now, we have to learn new ways of doing this thing, because some of these things are not like the kinds of pulling somebody aside and having a quiet diplomacy moment with somebody, you know, you're meeting over tea, over coffee, over cocktails. So it's really changing the whole scene.
That's good. Well, one of the things I want to do is I also want to say, as part of our diplomacy as well, I think we have so many wonderful individuals who are joining us, leaders in their own right from across advertising creativity. I want to say hello to a few people as well. Just randomly, Mike Miller, Mohammed Tanko, let's see a few more names here. Simon Lipschitz, Tommy Akinsulere, Toshan Burat, Zainab Mita, Eddie Uko, Doreen Kosi, just a few names. And as more people join us, welcome to this discussion that we're having today as part of the Loeries Nigeria Week with His Excellency Thami Mseleku, who's the High Commissioner of South Africa to Nigeria. High Commissioner, as part of the other discussions that we want to have is, I think also, is to get to know you a bit better during this time. Because I think, you know, as a Loeries, we're a creative organization. And a lot of people don't know this, but you have a very strongly rooted creative upbringing and youth, and especially in the music scene. Are you able to share some insights to your upbringing and your relationship with music?
No, thank you very much, Preetesh. You know, I can say, you know, one of the things that I usually claim is that I come from a musical family. And why? Because anybody who hears the name Mseleku will ask me, are you from the Mseleku family? Do you know Begi Mseleku? Do you know Wendy Mseleku? Those very big names in the music industry. Actually, then I say, yes, these are my brothers and my sisters. I claim them as such. But my own personal influence comes from my mother. My mother was a very established pianist, but more so a lyrist, a soprano lyrist. And she could actually get the walls rolling when she started singing. And she and I would actually do things together, and she would try and teach me piano, and I would say, no, I want my own instrument. So I started learning guitar at an early age, and we would actually work together. But also it's the influence of the church, because then all that would be practiced in the context of the church. She was an organist and a pianist in the church. I would also sing and play solos, all those kinds of things. So yes, the main influence comes from there, Preetesh. I could also say that as a result of that, it's in the family. For example, you know, in the creative industry, I always listen to my son's music which he produces. He's a DJ called DJ Mix, and he produces quite a number of these new artists. We always debate with him, because I say to him, what you are producing is not music, it's noise. Now I can see that actually, if I listen carefully, I find that it is music as such. So I think it's in the family, the music part of it.
That's a very interesting point, Your Excellency, because I think one of the challenges that for a lot of young people, and especially a lot of young people who come from previously disadvantaged backgrounds or different backgrounds, is that the creative arts was never seen as a viable career option. Yet I think one of the amazing things is your mom was on radio on Ukhozi FM, which is a major radio station in South Africa. And you've got your son in the same space. Do you think it's still a viable career option for a lot of people to go into the creative arts as youth today?
if my son had said to me earlier in the years that he wants to be a DJ, I would have said, you are wasting your time. Why don't you do something better? I mean, even myself as a parent who is in the music, into music, would not have seen that as a viable career. So I actually agree with you. It's difficult for parents to see the creative industry as a very serious space for their children to actually occupy in their careers, in their lives. But nowadays, I think because of the creative industry also opening up opportunities in many ways, people are getting more educated about that space and what it actually can bring and what it entails. So in the family, we have, I think people have actually moved more towards the creative space because of that. I have a daughter who's in marketing. I have another daughter. I have a granddaughter who's actually in the creative space around graphics and so on. We as a family can actually form, I always say it, we as a family can form a nice business in the creative sector. We have one of my sons is at the university in the Netherlands doing music, jazz music, wants to major in jazz composition. So we have a producer, a music producer, you have a guitarist, you have a player in terms of trombone, and then you have those that can market through the graphics, and we can be a very big Mseleku brand. And then we expand that with the other Mselekus. You've got my brother Langa there, who's father to Wendy Mseleku. And, you know, we can actually be a Mseleku brand, which is a music brand. So yes, it's possible.
So I think the amazing thing, as we have everyone joining us from across Africa and the Middle East, and especially we have a lot of attendees from Nigeria today as well. I think that's some good insight. If you have any ideas in terms of how to promote the Mseleku brand with His Excellency, there we've got a business idea already. Your Excellency, other than the music background is also important, but also one of the things we've asked everyone, and as we go through this journey to better understand your journey to get to this point as well, is we asked you if you ever had a book title about your life, and you recommended the title, The Maritzburg Tycoon. Tell us more about that. Why was that the title that you gave us?
Actually, this is a classic book in the Zulu literature. It's called Inkinsela Yasemgungundlovu, which means the Maritzburg Tycoon, and it's about this man who actually pretended to have come from Maritzburg and was pretending to be a very rich man who was trying to help this local community to sell their cattle, when in fact he was trying to swindle them. So I would actually say I represent that tycoonness of Maritzburg, but in a positive sense, in that Maritzburg shaped who I am. I lived in Maritzburg during the good times and the most difficult times. You know that it was one of the epicenters of internecine violence in the 80s. I was in the middle of those, part of that experience, and all that has shaped me into who I am now and where I sit. My commitment to serving the people was actually shaped in Maritzburg. So I am a tycoon. I'm very rich, but not rich in wealth. I'm rich in experience from Maritzburg, which is what I'm actually putting to the service of the nation now.
So that's very interesting. We come from the same province, because I was born in KZN as well, down in Durban in South Africa. So it's very interesting to hear that as well. And Your Excellency, I mean, you've had, I mean, that's true. Your experience, the wealth of experience you have is amazing. And obviously you spent your early years as an activist. How has that shaped you and shaped your experience in life?
Look, one of the things I learned early in life as an activist is that you know when you committed to the service of the people, It is actually not for any individual glory. And I'm actually concerned nowadays that many people get into government, get into service of the people, mainly for their personal glory, or particularly for their personal benefit, be it monetary benefit, etc., etc. I think actually I grew in a different culture where in fact commitment and service and the sense of community was very much a part of the life that I grew up under. So that I think has shaped my perspectives and views and perhaps approaches to life, to work, to everything that I do.
And I think one of the biggest challenges as well that anyone who's had to grow up in tough times under tough government regimes is that our stories have always been suppressed. And especially across the African continent, any country that's been under colonial power knows that the Afrocentric story and those amazing stories were always suppressed. So give you a little bit of background on my side, I studied archaeology, have a huge passion for history and strong stories from across Africa. But what's really interesting, I understand, is Dr. C.J. Buthelezi, who was your history teacher, was very instrumental in ensuring that you know, your creative thinking and outset was shaped by a lot of the stories of those Afrocentric stories that actually came back. Tell us about why that was so important for you.
You know, one of the things that I've always realized, even as a teacher after in my life, was that the influence of teachers in the lives of individuals is a very, very important influence. And there are some of them that stand out. And the individual that you have referred to, who is my principal at high school, was also my principal at my first teaching post at school. But at high school, he actually was an inspiration because he approached the subject of history from an Afrocentric perspective. I knew of some of the very important figures of the history of Africa from his approach to history. So he went beyond what was actually supposed to be what is called the syllabus. He was teaching African history in the true sense of the word. So if you talked about Nandi Azikiwe, I would actually learn that from as early as Standard 7, whereas in South Africa today, I wonder how many of those students actually know who Nandi Azikiwe is. And if you go to even Julius Nyerere, Jomo Kenyatta, all those African leaders, we, in terms of the approach to history, those were excluded. They were not important because we were looking at the history from the perspective of the colonizers. But he actually took a different approach, and that actually shaped my thinking about Africa as such.
Well, one of the things that I see quite a bit of, whether it's in advertising or film or television, is that globally, you know, there's a lot of cultures, Your Excellency, that are so proud of their history and their lineage, and it gets made into an ad. It supports the ad environment where it's part of the creative thinking, or it might become part of a television, even in fantasy, such as Game of Thrones that we're seeing around the world, or anything like that. One of the challenges we have is obviously from the creative outlet is a lot of these amazing African stories in terms of our history have either been lost or are not being made in terms of a creative outlet. Why do you think it's so important for us to tell authentically African stories, not just for the current generation, for the generations to come?
Look, African culture is about telling our stories in any case. We have an oral culture, an oral tradition that dates back ages where our history was actually told and performed. In other words, the grannies would be performing the very stories they were telling. Now, if we are actually moving from the performance of the grandmothers Where do we take it to? Who is now telling the stories? Who is now performing the stories? If we don't do that, we are actually losing very, very important cultural heritage, historical heritage, even scientific and economic heritage, because part of those stories were about how we see the world, what our world views are, our philosophies are, what our understanding of the cosmic environment that we are in. That's where the children would get our values, our understanding, our economics, our mathematics, how people actually used to survive. But if we don't really tell those stories, then we are not telling ourselves. We're telling somebody's story to ourselves. And therefore we'll project our own understanding of ourselves from somebody's perspective. It's very, very critical that we actually tell these African stories by Africans.
That's great. And do you think there's a role for the new technology? I mean, a lot of the people who've joined us today are using the latest technology and different ways to basically tell the stories within their fields. Do you see a logical transition of the stories from oral tradition to being able to go into these new mediums and as new technologies actually emerge right now?
I was 2 days ago. Some people in my office recommended that I actually watch a movie, a Nigerian movie, Living in Bondage. Okay, and the movie tells the African story, the Nigerian story from the Nigerian experience in a way that to me is actually very much progressive, and it's actually modern using the current technologies. So it's a movie that can be shown anywhere in the world. It will be actually seen from an African perspective, but also it can be seen as a universal theme, a theme about blindly following your dreams without really being careful about how other forces are actually using your dreams for their own purposes. That's a very simple story, but it's told in relation to the issue of the cults and the concerns about cultism in Nigeria, which is what people are concerned about. So I'm already saying that the current stories can be told, both in our oral tradition and also in infusing that into the new technologies that are emerging in many ways. We cannot actually not tell our stories because maybe there are new technologies and our stories don't fit into the new technologies. No, that's not true.
That's really good insight, Your Excellency. And you've been in Nigeria since October 2019, if I'm not making a mistake, and that's correct. I mean, I know the last few months have been pretty challenging with the lockdown, but have you had the time to actually immerse yourself in a lot of different cultural experiences in Nigeria and other creative outlets that are happening, other than just some of the movies?
Actually, I've been trying to do that. One of the dominant features of South African presence in Nigeria is of course your multi-choice DSTV, and it's a platform that has actually created a lot of possibilities for the creative arts, not only in the movies, but in marketing, in advertising, all those kinds of platforms. So my last engagement before the lockdown was to actually attend the African Magic Awards, which are held yearly in Lagos. In Lagos, that recognize talent in the African film industry and television industry and advertising industry, etc., etc. But I've also been very keen. I was supposed to attend a very important aspect of Nigeria, which is a Nigerian wedding, because it's got its own very peculiar cultural, cultural niceties, and I was supposed to actually attend one of those, and then COVID-19 led to a lockdown, and so the wedding was postponed. I haven't been able to experience it live, but that's one of the things I'd love to experience. Of course, Nigerian food, I have experienced before, and I'm experiencing it now. I'm a very big fan of pepper soup. The, the sort of dance, cultural, drumming industry, with my experience with the Nigerians diaspora in Malaysia and the Nigerian diaspora in Tanzania, I've been exposed to those cultural aspects, but I would like to experience them in the village itself, you know, with the village people, not a troupe that reenacts it only. So I'm still looking forward to it.
It's so funny you should say that, Your Excellency, because anyone who knows me, they'll know that my biggest complaint has been that this year I was due to visit Nigeria for the very, very first time. And sadly, because of COVID-19, I couldn't come. And that's exactly why I wanted to come. I wanted to come and, you know, experience the culture and be out. And I said, don't stick me in offices. Take me out and let me explore it. Sure. So I've been sitting and watching a lot of Nigerian ads. And one of the ones that has stuck with me is it's based on something that you were mentioning right now. It's actually based on a wedding. And it's the father and mother, and I'm the paraphrase, maybe somebody can help me with this, but the father and mother were at the wedding, and they told the daughter, go out and, you know, go find your husband. Are you sure you can find her? And we see her listening, having a little audio device in the ear like mine, and her future husband is directing her to where to come. And it's so heartwarming because right in the end, you find out that she's actually blind. And through this project, but it was a little bit of that experience, and I looked at it and I went, how amazing would it be to be at a Nigerian wedding and experience it instead of just watching it like this? So hopefully you allow me to gate crash your wedding. Maybe one day I can come to Nigeria, and if you have enough friends, you can tell me we'll gate crash your wedding together. Your Excellency, we have some questions. If anyone does have any questions for Your Excellency, please use the question and answer function. I'm going to read one. It's from Doreen Cozy, who's owner of DK's VIP projects. And she says, South Africa and Nigeria have found a good rhythm to strengthen relations between the two countries. What does His Excellency recommend these countries do differently beyond COVID-19 lockdown period to sustain the momentum, taking into account the new normal on all fronts, which is very true because we're moving in a totally new world. How do we ensure that we can build on this momentum and build relationships between Nigeria and South Africa?
Preetesh, thank you very much to DK for that question. One of the things that I thought as I was coming in here, you know, I came in October exactly just after the unfortunate incidents, and that didn't really reflect well the relationship between the two countries. And when I came in here between October and I think January, I was receiving quite a number of journalists, student organizations, different individuals wanting to speak about one issue only, xenophobia. And I was saying, actually the relationship between Nigeria and South Africa cannot be summed up in one word, xenophobia. How can we actually move away from that kind of summation? And one of the key things that I thought, because I'm talking in the context of the creative industry, is that this instrument is actually one of the most important instruments in ensuring that we close that bridge and go back to where we were and even beyond in relation to the relationship. Let's begin to actually use the creative industry to actually create those bridges. It's happening already, but we need more of it. We need more visibility in regard to that. Not just individual artists coming across and with their friends doing one or two things, but we need bigger things. We need the big industry to support those bigger things. For example, you say the Loeries are actually, they were initiated in South Africa and so on and so on. One day I'd like to see the Loeries being the venue, being Nigeria. for the awards themselves. What would stop that really strategically? And then in the Middle East 1 year, so that we can actually show that we're not just inviting people to South Africa, but we want to go to the people in Nigeria, we want to go to the people in the Middle East. And that's a platform that's very important, that you yourselves thought was very important to actually pull together the creatives. And through that process to cross-pollinate, but to create an understanding among people. So that's what I'm looking forward to. I'm just challenging you that maybe the Loeries one day should be held in Nigeria, but I know there may be constraints, but I'm just as an example saying it's very critical for us to think along those lines.
No, I completely agree with you, Your Excellency. I think there should be no constraints. Even if the constraints exist today, we need to think of ways to change it. And yes, someday the Loeries hopefully can be in Nigeria and being holding the event in Nigeria. And even leading up to that, the other things I think that's really impossible is in terms of this creative and cultural transfer of skills and information. What we would love to be able to see is, how can, and it should be a pan-African and a pan-regional goal as well. How can we tell authentic stories and share stories that happen in specific areas? For example, the Nollywood and the Nigerian film industry is fantastic, and a lot of people are attracted to it. Why aren't we looking at opportunities to shoot more ads within the Nigerian environment as well? And tell those stories, because we already can see these stories, which are as part of the Nollywood film industry, are shot in Nigeria, but resonate across Africa and even wider areas around the world. So yeah, the cultural, and in terms of cultural exchange, Your Excellency, maybe leading on to the next question, and from that point as well, how do we ensure greater cultural exchange between different areas so that we start telling more Pan-African stories and start celebrating stories from different areas in Africa?
That's exactly the point. That's actually what I feel is, if I don't actually answer that question within the next 4 years I'm here, in relation to Nigeria and South Africa, I would have failed in my mission, because I'm passionate about people-to-people relations. Governments, yes, it's very important for us at a government level, because we have to have the same policy perspective in international platforms like the World Health Organization, like the UN, etc. But at the end of the day, this is about people relations, especially if we're talking about the African integration. It must be people-driven and people-centered. And therefore, those cultural exchanges, I'm already speaking to big industry to say, one of the things that you need to do in your social responsibility is actually to focus on this element. How do you support exchanges of that nature? Cross-pollination, how do you support, and some of the businesses, the banks, for example, are very keen, because when I met with one bank, and I'm not going to mention it, they asked me, we are ready for this thing, when are we doing it? And so I would think that with the necessary support, we could be able to have those exchanges. When I arrived here, they were trying to make an arrangement of the exchange between young people, young students organizations from here, and young students organization in South Africa. So they were going to take the leadership of youth from here to visit South Africa and engage with the youth in South Africa. So that project is still there. But I would think that in the creative arts, it's even more important. We have a Cape Town Jazz Festival, and sometimes some of the artists from here go and play in the Cape Town Jazz Festival. But where do we have the African Jazz Festival as such? Why don't we make it into an African Jazz Festival that moves around, that is able to, well, starting between Nigeria and ourselves. I'm looking at the area of gospel music. Sorry, Preetesh, I'm into music.
I'm very happy.
So I look at the area of gospel music, and I see it's one of the strongest areas here in Nigeria. You have very, very good gospel music artists. And in South Africa, you have Gospel Music Awards, you've got the Summer Awards, you've got the Traditional Music Awards. We must move towards the African Traditional Music Awards, for example, so that we promote African traditional music. And we can only do that if we take some of the traditional music and dance troupes to come and exchange ideas, to visit one another. On the creative sides, we have to open the space for some of the people who are going to be actually using the images of Nigeria in a South African advert, and vice versa, so that people can actually learn some of the things and deal with these perceptions that we have about each other.
I'm going to read a comment from Adenike Adefila, who says, amazing insight from His Excellency, so exciting. So I think that's amazing that what you're saying is resonating with a lot of people as well, Your Excellency. One of the things that you're touching on, and I think where you're really passionate about, is education. And for our industry, I think one of the things we're keen about, we're passionate about education, but again, we also want to see how we can share more of that creative education. As part of the work that you're doing, do you see opportunities for the youth? As you said, you're speaking about youth coming to South Africa as well. What else do you think we should be doing? If you had to give us any advice in terms of, in the creative space, in terms of sharing ideas and sharing new thinking in the education space, what should we be thinking about right now to ensure that Nigeria, South Africa, Tanzania, where you've been, or the Pan-African area just participates better together in an education space?
I think when we can start small. For example, if you're able to pull together a joint team in various areas of expertise related to the production industry, for example, the production of movies, which in fact Nollywood has been doing for a long time. When I was in Tanzania, I had a number of Tanzanian filmmakers who wanted to actually be connected with South African filmmakers. They wanted training. They wanted training in filming and being behind the camera, in production, in directing. They knocked at our door several times, just hungry to get that South African experience, because they thought that was actually good. Now, I would think that if we started small and had moved some of the workshops, have a workshop for 2 weeks or 3 weeks here, taking the best of ours and the best of Nigeria to workshop the young people in these kinds of things. Makeup industry, Nigeria is actually a leader in that kind of thing, but because of the industry. But the makeup industry, we in South Africa think makeup industry is about what the Italians or the British can do better, or the US. Actually, there's lots that we can learn in Nigeria when they create all these masks, these images in the faces. You know, they have perfected the art of African mask, African makeup. So we need a group of them also to go and do workshops in South Africa. That's what we need. We start small and then we grow it into a kind of Pan-African school of the arts and what have you, school of creative arts. We get the universities to do that, use their platforms to do that at the higher level. But starting small, Preetesh, it's very good.
Yeah. And the challenges of COVID-19, Your Excellency, I know we're excited about doing as much as we can. Do you think COVID-19 is actually gonna hinder us in terms of these goals, or do you think we'll eventually be able to rise past it?
If we say we're in the creative industry, then we'll find the creativity around COVID-19. And I'm very optimistic that human beings are actually resilient and they're very creative. I think we're beginning to find the creative spaces already, and opportunities around this are opening up. But I think there will be a point, there'll be a time and a point where COVID-19 is not with us. So we must think medium term to long term, because we are here together to integrate Africa and make it great again. And so Agenda 2063 is actually saying 2063, 2030, etc., etc. We must also think along those lines. COVID-19 is a momentary thing. It can take a year. Maybe it is giving us the space and the time to really sit back and reflect and think, what should we have done? How can we plan better so that we can actually do it as soon as we are able to open the skies, as soon as we are able to do these things? So yes, no, COVID-19 is not a constraint, it's just a moment.
Well, it's such a good point as well, because as I said, one of the key pillars for the Loeries is in terms of inspiration. And what we're trying to do is inspiring people to think differently, which is one of our platforms today. As we move beyond, and one of the things we're pushing is a hashtag beyond COVID, and thinking about moving beyond COVID itself. If you think about that beyond COVID environment, Your Excellency, how would you like to see Nigeria, South Africa, or Nigeria and any other country around Africa working closer together to be able to deliver on these creativity goals?
Well, I have already alluded to some of these things. Beyond COVID, I'm very keen to have a very serious engagement with the Nigerian creative scene, so as to see where we can give impetus. I know, as I say, these things are happening at a small scale, but to give impetus to actually telling the African story, particularly supporting the African Agenda 2063, and therefore the integration agenda. One other area I'm very passionate about, Preetesh, is language. And I'm very keen to begin to see how we can, you know, when I came here, I actually was excited to open my TV and see Isibaya was on TV. And when I opened it, I actually realized that it's actually Isibaya in Nigerian English. It has been dubbed in a very Nigerian English way. So I am very excited to hear people calling people's names like Dlamini and Makubane in a very Nigerian way. But I mean, that's exactly the point I'm making, that some of these stories could actually be dubbed into some of the languages that we have in South Africa. And they are stories that our people can relate to. I can tell you, our people actually watch Nollywood like nobody's business. They love it.
Yeah.
They really love it. But the issue for me is, how do we then use that space to tell the stories that we want to tell, which are about integration, which are about working together, about the common history, about our Africanness. So for me, that should be the priority post-COVID-19. How do we rebuild that kind of connection, not only between Nigeria and South Africa, but Africa as a whole? If you take right now the campaign around this US situation, and you can see the kind of solidarity across the world around Black Lives Matter, and the notion that these lives are not cheap is actually even being embraced by people who are not necessarily Black, because they believe in the cause of human rights, of the protection of life, etc., etc. So you've been able to mobilize people to unite in that kind of way. We need that in the African context. We need ways, creative ways of campaigns to ensure that our people say, I am an African first, and then I am South African.
Yes.
And yes, also to say the same thing, to say I'm a Nigerian, therefore I'm South African. And I'm South African, therefore I'm Nigerian, I'm Tanzanian, etc., etc. We need to move towards that spirit. It's not very easy, but we must work at
it. That's true, because if we look at it, it's the lines that exist and the borders that exist were put in by people who are no longer here. So therefore, why do we stick to these borders and these lines and create these cultural differences? Now, one of the I haven't read all this, but one of the attendees as well has got a comment. Cultural exchanges was emphasized by His Excellency. So also business relationships, etc., between Nigeria and South Africa cannot be overemphasized. How are these achievable when gaining entry to these destinations are almost very difficult? What plans does His Excellency have underway to ensure that we begin to foster seamless relationships amongst our nations?
I can actually identify with the questioner. When I was in Tanzania, I actually learned how difficult and challenging the business environment is. But also I'm learning that also here, partly because of the kinds of suspicions that we've created for one another, but also some of it has to do with unintended consequences of very progressive policies. Because you see, for example, on the one hand, we are signing the free trade agreement. On the other, in Africa at the moment, there's a growing tendency of protectionism against fellow Africans in various ways. So we are going to work hard to actually reconcile these two things: protectionism versus Africa free trade. And it's going to be an ongoing learning, educational, joint policy formulation approach. It's not going to be easy. So I agree with the person who's commenting that sometimes it's very difficult, but also it's created by our own approaches to the other countries as South Africans, if I may confirm. I think now South African business is actually changing. It's becoming much more aware of the environment they're working in, much more embedded in that environment, also ensuring that the local people are empowered and using local content. The more that happens, the more the environment is going to change for our businesses. Because in the past, we were just coming in, doing what we were doing, and living with all the resources, and people would actually love to hate us. And I think we're working better now. I think our businesses are beginning to be actually embedded in the countries, in the African countries. So much so that sometimes when people, for example, in Nigeria, for one reason or the other, young people are always enthusiastic to find something to protest on and to attack. So when they attack a ShopRite, yes, it's a South African brand, but ShopRite in Nigeria is hardly owned by the South Africans. It's a Nigerian business, you see? So that's what I mean. The more people realize that, no, these businesses are ours, they are not foreign to us, the more they actually embrace them. Even those that remain in the South African hands, it depends on how they're actually working in the environment. So we must make the local people own the brand, just like they must make us own their brands too. So that will actually assist us in the business environment too.
That's such a good point, because Your Excellency, before I joined the Loeries, I came from the brand world and dealing with a lot of brands. And I always find it really so strange that, you know, across Africa, we could get access to all of the same brands that I could find in London, or find in New York, or find in any of these countries. And you could easily go there and you'd see the same brands on African shelves. Yet I could not, let's say being based in South Africa, I could not see a Dangote branded product, or Chivita, or all these ads and saying, or Nali from Malawi. I could not find these products, which are African products, on our shelves. And I think eventually, as you are highlighting, we do need to get to a point where we're proud to support and buy African brands. I want to be proud to be able to say that I can get Nigerian products in South Africa and South African products in Nigeria or Tanzania or Zambia or wherever else it may be. And I always find it so strange that it was a lot easier to get an international product in any African market than you could get an African product in another African country.
Yes, and Preetesh, if we can find if we can find that in the design industry, particularly in the clothing industry, You know, in
Yes.
South Africa, that's a growing thing. People are looking for the Tanzanian clothes, the Nigerian clothes, the Ghanaian clothes, and they design them in particular ways. And the tukis that they wear, the women. If we can find that in that kind of space, why can't we find it in other spaces too? Because it's actually there, and therefore the Nigerian designers that are working in South Africa are really doing very well because of that kind of thing there. So it can be done.
That's a good point. If you know any where I can find some good Nigerian designers, yeah, let me know, because that was one of the other things I was excited about coming to Nigeria. We had somebody who lined up an amazing tailor, and there was some amazing clothes that I was looking forward to getting. I know there was a very personal side, but Your Excellency, we're almost out of time. It's amazing. I've got I not just questions. I have like probably 3 or 4 more sections that I needed so much to chat to you, and we've run out of time because it's been such an amazing discussion. Maybe one of the things in closing, just to speak to our attendees as well, and also just to highlight that this chat will be made available on the Loeries YouTube site and on our websites and exposed to everyone across Africa and the Middle East. So maybe just some words of support. I think it's a tough time. A lot of people are trying to find this new normal and trying to return to some sort of normality. What is your voice? What is your words of support to everyone across Africa and the Middle East right now?
Well, let me start in the creative industry, in the creative space. I know that's the space, one of the spaces that have really been impacted upon negatively in this context of COVID-19. I'm aware of the discussions at home about how the creative industry actually needed to be some responses from government in terms of assistance. So I'm very much aware of the challenges that COVID-19 has actually produced for not only South Africa, but in relation to creatives across Africa. Here in Nigeria, there were some very exciting programs that I was following that suddenly couldn't be done because they couldn't shoot more of those programs, and I still miss them very much. I wish I was watching them during COVID, but they can't do it. So I'm very much aware of the challenges, but I'm actually also very optimistic that this opportunity has given us a sense of reflection. And when we emerge from here, it can only be uphill. You know, there's one artist or one poet I love who talks about the fact that when we have climbed the mountains and we have reached the top, then we'll realize how difficult the plains will be. We'll also realize, and of course you saw that as the ending of Mandela's book also, which also has the same implications. Yes. We'll also realize that those plains that we think we've achieved are actually having more potholes and mountains, and therefore we'll think we've actually achieved victory. It's just the beginning of another fight and the battle. So beyond this, we'll reach the plains, but we should be ready for more fights, more challenges, and therefore more creativity. Thank you very much to everybody.
Thank you so much, Your Excellency. Just one last comment from Firdaus Bulbulya, who says, great conversation. Your Excellency, we met in Zanzibar last year when we were hosting the Zanzibar Film Festival, and regards to those Bulbulya. Your Excellency, this has been so inspiration. Thank you so much for giving us your time for our Nigeria Creative Week, the Loeries Nigeria Creative Week. This has been an amazing conversation, and hopefully one day I'll be able to meet you either in Abuja in Nigeria, and hopefully we'll be able to host you at the Loeries at some point, because I think you have some amazing stories from not just, and you are an honorary creative. You're creating amazing stuff. So there's multiple hats as a diplomat, as a teacher, but also as a creative as well. And thank you for sharing this with us. I also want to thank you so much. Thank you so much, Your Excellency. I also want to pass a big thank you to Adenike Adefile from VQI Communications in Nigeria, who's been supportive and helping us with this Nigeria Creative Week and having all of these amazing people on board. So thank you everyone who joined us, and I look forward to chatting further at next week's Loeries Creative Hour, where we return back to our normal programming. But Your Excellency, thank you so much. Thank you for the inspiration, and we look forward to liaising with you further.
Thank you very much. Thank you to everybody. Thanks. And good luck.
Thank you so much, Excellency. Take care. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.